Hey, how are you doing today? This is Joseph Flahiff, and I'm here to help you understand a little bit more about the whole entrepreneurial life cycle from idea stage, startup growth, expansion, and maturity. Today, I want to kind of define a little bit more deeply what the idea stage contains, what you're trying to do in that stage, and how you know you're in it or out of it. Where are you in that? I realized the other day I was talking to someone and I asked them, which stage are you in? And I didn't have a video to point them to say, this is where you're at. So I did one yesterday that was an overview of all of these, and now I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into the idea stage. Good morning, Brian Fletcher. Glad to see you here. Give me some hearts and likes and loves and all those great things. Let people know about this podcast or this, what is this, live cast, so that more people can be helped. I love that. So in the idea stage, you are so nascent, your very beginning stages, and you have no idea really what your idea is. You may have an idea. Most entrepreneurs think they know what they want to create when they start doing it, right? So they have an idea of what they want. But what you really need to do is go find your customers and talk to them and ask them what they really want. It may match up perfectly with what you have in your idea, but it may also be way over here, something you didn't expect it to be. So what you want to do is follow a cycle that is sort of like this. This is called the design thinking model. It's just a great way of thinking about that idea and refining it to the point where it's actually a testable, viable idea for your customers in the future. So the very first thing you want to do in this is empathize. So what the heck does empathize mean? It means put yourself in their shoes. It means get up away from your desk and go find your customers and hang out with them for a while. You have to talk to people. You need to go talk with your ideal customer and say, hey, what are the problems that you're dealing with? And we go through a series of diverging and converging thinking through this idea stage. This is a very divergent thinking moment. You are diverging. You're talking with your customer and you're going, what are all the things that could go better if the world was perfect and in a year you had a magic wand and everything was better? What would it look like? What would it feel like? What things would you have? What activities would be around? What would you be doing, feeling? Where would you live? All of these kinds of concepts. So you get in and you start blowing those ideas out with them and ideating all those possibilities. The second thing you do then is you define. So this is a convergent thinking model. So you've come up with a billion ideas. Now you start to narrow those down, again, still with your customer, to, okay, which are the really important ones? Let's prioritize these. If you could only have, okay, I asked you to do the 1 year dream. Now let's narrow it down. And if you could only have one of those things, what one thing would make the biggest move of the needle for you? What would be the most important for you in your life, right? What would it be? And so you narrow down and you define, okay, this is the problem that they want solved. So this is define the problem. This is identifying problems, right? Define the problem, identify the problem, and then you move down here. Now, the truth of the matter is you may get to this define stage and realize I can't do anything for that problem, or that problem really isn't solvable. And then you go back up to the empathize stage and you keep brainstorming with people. But if all things worked perfectly in the world, which they never do, you go from empathize to define, then you would ideate. So again, divergent thinking. So this is convergent thinking. This is divergent. I'm sorry. This is divergent thinking. You're expanding out the possibilities. This is convergent thinking. You're narrowing in on one idea. You're ideating. You're divergent thinking. You're thinking about all the possible ways to solve this issue. And then at the end of this, you get to convergent thinking. Here, ideate, but still about the solution. That's about the solution. So you're coming up with solutions, and here is seriously convergent thinking, because you're prototyping this idea. And by prototyping, I don't mean you are building something you can sell. I mean you're coming up with a way to test your idea super simply. My favorite example of this is if you're building like a software app for a phone. My phone's over there. You will often, when we're in this stage, we will often actually just take like sticky notes or something and say, okay, so if this was your screen and you had this picture here of people and blah, 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 and your activity was this, you know, what would you do? Well, I'd push on this button. Well, okay, great. When you do that, this screen would pop up and it would show you this information, or it would show a video. And then what would you do? Well, I'd click on the video. Okay, then the video would pop up and it would cover this, you know, top of the screen, and it would look like this and have this information down here. And then what would you do? And so it's just called paper prototyping. You're not building anything. This is completely not, it's not only not scalable, it's not even functional. But it's testing the idea out. So you're able to prototype and test. Prototype, then you test. Then you give it to them, and you have them go through that process of, what is it? How would you do it? How would you interact with it? What would you do? And then from your testing, you may realize that something didn't work. That's wrong. It really, you know. So you may go back to empathize. You may go back to ideate, or you may go back to prototype. Even from prototyping, you may go back to ideating. So these are not sequential. Don't think of them as sequential, but think of them as things you do in the process. This is where you start. You start with empathize. And in the end, this is where you'll end. Let's put an E for end. Because once you have finally found that one thing that your customers really, really want, and you've proven out that, okay, my paper prototype or my you know, there's different ways of doing this kind of testing, but you really it's like paper and pipe cleaners and rubber bands and tape. Super simple prototyping. My prototype worked. I've got an idea. I think this might fly. Then what you do is you drop out of this stage and you go, now you're in the startup stage. Now there's other things to think about in the idea stage. The goal of the idea stage is idea confirmation, right? I have an idea. I've confirmed that it's good. This is really what we want to do for our customers. They're gonna love it. I'm passionate about it, excited about it. There are folks who provide idea stage funding. They call it seed funding or pre-seed funding. And you can go out and try and get that money if you want. I'm all about bootstrapping myself. I'm a bootstrapper, you know, fund myself from the start to the finish. It's all me. But if you want to go for funding, that's fine too. And it depends on the scope and scale of the problem you're trying to solve, right? If you're trying to solve world hunger, then you're probably going to need some funding. Or even if you're trying to solve hunger in your own city, you're still going to need to find funding for that and find supporters for that. This is the process of coming up with the idea. The process of coming up with funding and partners and all of that goes along with this, but there's different things that you'd be doing with that. You need to have a solid, when you get to probably this stage, you can start to then pitch your idea. Because when you're just at the empathize stage, you're like, I want to solve world hunger. And everybody goes, that's a great idea. Why don't you come back when you have an idea of how you might do that? So you can't really ask for funding here. Maybe you can. Once you've prototyped, definitely. If you have a tested idea, absolutely, but that's way down the line. But so funding is a possible thing that you can have. You might want to be looking for co-founders who you could work with to get that done. But this is the general idea behind the idea stage. Just want to make a really quick video on this. And once you leave, you have a test that everyone goes, yeah, this might actually work. Then you drop over to the startup stage. And we'll talk about the startup stage tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. I love you. Bye-bye.